Sarah and Zeke entered the ski lodge. Zeke felt like he was in the mess. He wasn't used to bawling his eyes out in front of people because he was used to being strong. He did everything he could to conceal his emotions, but up to recent he was losing it. He couldn't keep his emotions in check even if he tried. "I'm sorry," Zeke muttered. Sarah turned to him with a questioning stare. "Huh?" Sarah asked. Zeke turned to the girl and he said, "I'm a complete mess right now. I'm sorry I'm like this." "Hey, don't be, Zeke. You went through a traumatic experience when you lost your brother. Your dad used to hurt you and your mom left you and your brother with your father. How you're feeling right now is normal," Sarah said. "You didn't start dating me because I'm like this," Zeke said. "Wrong. I started dating you because you were cute and nice, and I could tell that something bad had happened to you," Sarah said. "I knew what I was getting myself into. I haven't regretted it since." Zeke's eyes widened and said, "How could you have known?" "Because the look on your face when you showed up in the cabin was the same look that when my dad has. I see it today, even every day. Bottom line, we look out for each other. That's the main point," Sarah said. Zeke smiled and he said, "Thanks, Sarah." Sarah nodded and hugged the boy. She kissed him on the cheek and she said, "You have to keep in mind that I have problems with my anxiety, but you didn't care about that. You started dating me right away." They separated from the hug as Zeke was surprised of how mature the girl was, especially since she suffered from anxiety and was sheltered her whole life. "I guess you do have a point," Zeke said. "Of course I do. Now I want to go decorate the Christmas tree before you drag me outside again for gun training," Sarah said with a smirk. Zeke smiled and he said, "Okay." The two teenagers walked over and started placing Christmas ornaments on the tree. "Hey, you're back," Sarita said. "You feeling all right?" "Yeah, I'm okay," Zeke said. He didn't exactly want to talk about his brother. The last thing he really wanted to do was cry again. "Well, okay," Sarita said. Didn't sound too convinced that Zeke was okay, but she didn't push the subject any further. She turned back to the tree. "All we need is a tree topper." "We always put an angel on top of my tree," Sarah said. Sarita smiled and she said, "My family and I didn't celebrate Christmas until the last few years, but we enjoyed it and embraced the tradition. It's such a fun holiday." "I could go find the topper," Clementine said. "That would be perfect. We still have a couple of ornaments left," Sarita said. She proceeded to place the ornaments on the tree while Clementine went upstairs to find the topper. Sarah helped them putting the ornaments on the tree. "What about you, Zeke? What did you use as a topper?" Sarita asked. We didn't have a topper," Zeke said. "Why not? That's the best part about decorating a Christmas tree," Sarita said. "We didn't have enough money to buy one," Zeke explained. "Money was a bit hard to come by in my family." "I see," Sarita said. "That's too bad." Zeke nodded his head before looked up at Clementine and she put the angel on top of the tree. It looked nice. "She looks cool," Sarah said. Sarita finished placing the last ornament on the tree and she said, "Perfect. You know this place is starting to feel like a real home now that you and your friends are here. We might have an exciting Christmas now." "There's hope to hoping," Zeke said. "Hoping? You're more than welcome to stay as far as I'm concerned," Sarita said. "As a group we appreciate it, but we're kind of on the run," Zeke said. "On the run? Who's chasing you?" Sarita said. "Bad people," Sarah said. Clementine was walking up and joined them. Sarita frowned and said, "It's depressing to see what the world's become. Very few people nowadays even show the smallest sense of compassion." "These people might still be tracking us," Zeke said. "You and your group may be in danger by bringing us in. You may have to leave so they won't hurt you." "But this is our home," Sarita said. "I don't think Kenny, Walter, or Matthew will be willing to leave." "You should talk to them," Clementine said. Sarita nodded her head before she heard Kenny's voice. "Well now, you four have been busy." "Kenny, isn't it wonderful?" Sarita said. "It certainly is," Kenny said. Sarita picked up the boxes that held the ornaments. "I got it, hon." Kenny reached for the boxes in Sarita's hands. "I think I can handle it, Kenny," Sarita said. "I said I got it," Kenny snapped. Before snatching the boxes from Sarita's hands, he walked off with the boxes in hand. "Is that normal?" Sarah asked Clementine. Clementine frowned and said, "It's common." Kenny just likes to play gentleman, but let me tell you, when I first met him, he wouldn't fit a finger, Sarita said. She then turned to the three children and she said, "How about you two go check with your friends? Dinner will be ready soon." She walked away from the tree and then went over to talk to Matthew and Walter. Zeke, Sarah, and Clementine went over to see Luke, Nick, Carlos, Rebecca, and Alvin had congregated around the fire. Clementine and Zeke proceeded to walk over to join the adults, with Sarah being more reluctant and following behind them. "We can't be for sure if we lost them," Carlos said. "We should leave at dawn." "So what can we do? Keep running?" Nick said. "I'm sick of running. It's about time we fought back." "At what the cost?" Alvin said. "Nick, we can lose a ton of people if we attack Carver and whoever he's brought with him." "We can't live life on the road. It's too hard with the children and the baby," Rebecca said. She bobbed Genevieve in her arms. "And I don't have any intention of being taken back there." "We all are alive because we ran," Carlos said. "And now look at us. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place," Luke said. "Luke, we need to keep running. Eventually Carver will realize it's not worth the effort to find us," Alvin said. Rebecca shook her head and she said, "He'll never stop. He'll keep looking for us until he finds us or dies trying." Luke sighed and he said, "You're right. We need to fight back. This is it. We could talk to Kenny and his people and ask them for help." Alvin and Carlos weren't convinced by the best idea. They seemed a bit disgruntled. "Things will work out," Rebecca said as she placed a hand on Alvin's shoulder. "I hope so," Alvin said. "Well, everyone, dinner is served. Come on and eat," Walter said from the two tables. Two group members have left the living area to went over to one of the tables. Sarah took Zeke's hand and led him over to a table where Luke, Alvin, Rebecca, Nick, Carlos, and Genevieve sat. Clementine watched as her adoptive parents and friends went to the table, so to the left, Kenny, Serena, Matthew, and Walter were on the table to the right. She saw that Luke was about to wave over her until Kenny said, "Come over here, Clem." Rebecca and Alvin looked back at the girl, as if it were her eyes on her. In just a few, this was uncomfortable for her. She remembered how she was seen as the wimpy kid at school. Remembering she knew how frustrated it was by being picked last when she played a scrimmage of soccer. She looked back and forth between two tables until she finally decided to go over to Kenny's table. She had to. It had been so long since she last seen him. There was a lot of little to talk about. "Here you go," Walter said, handing a bowl over to Clem. "Thanks," the girl said as she sat down. "So, Clem, what's the deal with the kid?" Kenny said. "What's his name?" "Luke. He's the leader. You trust him?" "Kenny," Sarita said. "Sarita, we don't know these people," Kenny said. "They seem nice," Walter said. "They're looking out to free children and a baby." "Yeah, and gators are too nice until they rip their arm off," Kenny said. "Yeah, Luke's a nice guy. I trust him," Clementine said. Kenny nodded and before he said, "Sarita was just telling me you were on the run." "Some people are after us," Clementine said. "Well, you don't have to worry about that. They go tomorrow, and you could stay here," Kenny said. Clementine's eyes widened. She wouldn't believe what she just heard. Kenny was willing to get her away from her own group, and of course she never told them about being adopted by Alvin and Rebecca. She made sure not to tell him. She had a feeling that he would have gotten upset if she did tell them about that. "Kenny, hold on. What about the other children and the baby?" Sarita asked. "It wouldn't hurt to have more people here. We could help them. The only other people from that group I'd be willing to take in is the baby, and she is Krista and Omid's daughter," Kenny said. "The rest of them can leave, as far as I'm concerned." "That might upset the baby since she's very attached to Rebecca and Alvin," Sarita said. "She's just a baby. She'll get over it," Kenny said. "Kenny, I can't accept your offer," Clementine said. "What? Why not?" Kenny said as a scowl formed on his face. "These people are my friends. They took me in when I thought everyone I knew was dead," Clementine said. "And I always be thankful for that, Clem. But come on. People like these don't know how to raise a kid. I'm willing to bet that Doc is the only one who has a kid. And that's he and the girl with some resemblance to each other," Kenny said. "Lee didn't know what he was doing either. He never had a kid before me," Clementine said. "That's different, Clem. Lee was different." Kenny said. Kenny, please, I want to be with those people, Clementine said. I'm sorry, Clem, but my decision's made. You and Jen will stay here, and the rest of them can go, Kenny said. Clementine sighed before shaking her head. I'm sorry, Kenny, but I really can't stay if you force them to leave. Clementine, you're a child. You don't make decisions like that. You leave it up to the adult, Kenny said. Kenny, these people are more than just my friends. They're also my family. Rebecca and Alvin adopted me as their daughter, Clementine said. Kenny's eyes widened and his mouth hung open. He knew this wasn't going to end well. She looked over at Serena, Matthew, and Walter to see they were surprised, but not as surprised as Kenny. Well, that does change things, Walter said. He turned to Kenny and continued, Maybe we should let them stay. I would like to have a class of students again. He turned back to Clementine. I used to be a teacher. Walter was soon interrupted by Kenny. No, Kenny said. Clem, what are you thinking? Why would you let them adopt you? They're complete strangers. They're good people, Kenny. I've been with them for almost 2 years. My parents are Walkers and Lee's dead. I wanted the family and they wanted a child, Clementine explained. Kenny, please, Sarita said, as she placed a hand on his shoulder. Kenny shrugged her off before looking down at his food. He was angry and lost in thought. Sarita exchanged worried glances at Walter and Matthew. Clementine felt bad for making Kenny angry with her. It felt like it was a decision of being adopted came out of nowhere. Alvin and Rebecca had been looking after her for weeks before they officially adopted her. She heard footsteps coming in from behind them before stopping. She looked over to see Luke sitting down. I think Matthew and I will start cleaning up, Walter said. He and Matthew got up from the table and started gathering empty bowls and used silverware. Kenny looked up at her and said, So Clem has told me some people in your group adopted her. Yeah, Rebecca and Alvin. But that's not important. We need your help, Luke said. There's a man who's been chasing us is still on our tail, and we're done running. We want to fight back. Give me one good reason why I should help you, Kenny said. Because if you don't, Carver will get exactly what he wants for a long time. He'll get Clem. He'll manipulate her to become like him, Luke said. Kenny's eyes widened as he looked over the child. Is that why he's after you? Kenny asked Clementine. Clementine nodded in response. That's why he's after all of us. He wants me as his heir, Clementine said. Kenny sighed before Luke continued. Now you see what we're up against. Look, if you want to make sure that Clem doesn't become a raging psychopath, you'll help us. Kenny nodded and he said, Fine, I'll help. What's the plan? Alright, you got some and I got some work to do, Luke said as he turned to Clementine and said, You should probably go check in with Alvin and Rebecca. Clementine nodded before she got up and walked over to her adoptive parents. They were back into bringing in the living room area to keep an eye on Genevieve. Clementine walked over to them. Hey, sweetie, how are you doing? Alvin asked. Okay, Clementine said. I'm sorry I didn't join you for dinner. I had to talk to Kenny. We heard you all right? Rebecca asked. Clementine nodded in response. Clem, I think I owe you an apology, Rebecca said. For what? Clementine asked. She was surprised. She didn't think her adoptive parents had done anything wrong to her. We haven't been paying much attention to you as of recent. It just seems like we've been ignoring you and focusing on Genevieve. We are sorry, Alvin said. Mom, Dad, I've been an only child for 11 years. I think I'm okay. It's just a bit of an adjustment, but I'm happy to have a baby sister. She's cute and fun, Clementine said. Her two adoptive parents smiled at her. Thank you, baby. We're lucky to have you too, Rebecca said. And I'm lucky to have you both, Clementine said. Speaking of having a baby sister, I think your father and I will also be adopting Genevieve like we adopted you. Would you be alright with that? We're going to make it official that you two are sisters. Jen is our adoptive daughter, Rebecca said. I would love that, Clementine said with a big smile. Her smile faded as she said, but I don't think Zeke would like the idea. Her parents frowned and walked over to Zeke and Sarah, and they were about to head outside. Yeah, we're gonna have to talk to Zeke, Alvin said. Zeke walked outside with his bow in hand. Sarah walked alongside him with the handgun. The two went over to the nearby trees, but they stayed relatively far away from it. Okay, ready to do this? Zeke asked. I guess so, Sarah said. She raised the handgun and aimed at the tree. She had came a long ways. She didn't lock her elbows and she maintained a good posture. It was good that Zeke knew the basics of using a gun. She aimed at the tree and squeezed the trigger. Her shot was a bit off, but it was an improvement. Good aim. Try aiming a little to the left, Zeke said. Sarah nodded and adjusted her arm and shot the tree dead center. Nice shot, Zeke said. You're getting better at this. Thanks to you, Sarah said. Zeke scoffed and he said, I only taught you the basics. And look where it's gotten me, Sarah said. I wouldn't be doing this without your help. Zeke smiled at the girl until he heard a walker. He heard the sound of the creature's growl and turned around to see it limping closer to the two from the surrounding woods. All right, you ready to apply everything you have learned? Zeke asked. He took one of the arrows out of the quiver and pulled it back in the bow. Wait, no, I'm not ready for this, Sarah said in a panicked tone of voice. Don't worry, you'll do fine. Remember everything? You learn to take a breath and stay calm, Zeke said. You're stronger than this thing. You can do this. Sarah was a bit unsure. She raised a handgun and aimed it at the walker. Her breathing was heavy and grip the gun was shaky. She fired her first shot, which missed. Zeke lowered his bow and held onto her arms. It's okay. Take a deep breath, squeeze the trigger, keep your aim steady. She then took a breath which allowed her to relax. Her arms didn't shake very much. She pulled the trigger and the next thing she knew, the walker jolted back as it fell to the ground dead. Sarah huffed as Zeke went over to the walker. The bullet hole was near the center of the walker's skull. He looked up to Sarah and said, Good job, you did it. Sarah smiled and ran up to hug him. Thanks for helping me. I can't believe I did it. This is so cool. I should go tell Dad. He'll be so proud of me. Are you sure? Zeke asked. Sarah released him from the hug and she said, I hope so. She had a huge grin on her face.